Dragons are one of the most iconic fantasy creatures to have ever existed, and have undergone many changes, as illustrated in this picture here. Made uniform aside, how would actual, realistic dragons in human form work? And we have a very great wealth of information to answer this question. For example, in Dungeons & Dragons, and Pathfinder for that matter, these scaly creatures could actually change their body form into that of a human, thanks to the polymorph spell. So they can assume a human form for as long as they can cast the spell. And we have seen a very nice visual illustration of this in the game Pathfinder: Wrath of the Righteous. And since dragons are able to enter into a human form, at least part of them will also be able to enter another human form, which would then enable cross-species activities mostly seen in rural areas, in furry communities, or in the actual in-game lore of Pokémon Diamond and Pearl. But in contrast to these interspecies reviews, the union of dragon and man can result in offspring apparently, meaning that dragon blood and the genetic information, the magic, the spirit, the essence of whatever gives a dragon power would also be, at least in part, become something that humanity can make its own. And over the many generations of union between dragon and adventurous women will become also a stable trait of humanity, even if the genes or magic lies dormant for generations. And I say women because if a human male would impregnate a female dragon, I'm venturing to guess that the pregnancy would last for years, if not decades. So dragon blood will enter humankind mostly the other way around. And dragon blood in Dungeons & Dragons enhances the strength, dexterity, the wisdom, agility or charisma of the ones with dragon blood flowing through their veins, as well as enhance resistances against all manner of things. And dragon blood in Dungeons & Dragons enhances the strength, dexterity, the wisdom, agility or charisma of a person, all of course depending on which dragon blood is flowing through one's veins, and it will also greatly grant bonuses to resistances against certain things. And those with dragon blood can also transform part of their body, their skin for example, into that of a dragon, making it way tougher and more resistant against, for example, fire damage, if your dragon ancestor was also able to resist fire fairly well. So in short, being part dragon blood alone would make you overpowered compared to normal humans. And even if your blood lies dormant, and you yourself don't manifest any of its magic or traits, it would still make you a highly sought after dating partner, even if you're a commoner and the woman or man of your dreams is of noble birth. Just because dragon blood makes you actually, on a physical level, stronger and more resilient. And that is just dragon blood, and it alone would mean that, especially in medieval times, where marriage alliances and family was much more important than it is in our day and age, would have a rather easy life, or at least lots of opportunity for such an easy life, because those with dragon blood would not only notice that they have this trait dormant inside of themselves once a child awakens his hidden powers, but every nation, knightly order, institution, church, temple, and anything else that is vaguely interested in being powerful, such as noble families for example, would search far and wide, looking for anyone with this blood. And since it is a magic fantasy world with literal dragons in it, there will most certainly be a magic spell that could detect dragon blood, since again it is just that potent. And sooner or later the elite of any society would have this trait within their blood. And all of that is just with dragon blood alone. A proper dragon in human form would be even more powerful, because let's say that it is just a regular dragon unable to end his polymorph spell for one reason or another, and was alongside with enough other dragons, basically imprisoned in their human flesh form, so that they could create a stable population and one that would be able to procreate with still avoiding the nasty things that comes with turning the family tree into a circle. And of course, this would mean that a stable population of dragons in human form would eventually emerge. And the result would be almost as overpowered as the normal dragons, and something that would almost always come to rule our own world, because they are just that much more potent. A dragon is, by definition, by default, way more magical, way stronger, and way longer lived than, for example, even elves. So there would be almost no way for humanity to resist these creatures, except sheer weight of numbers. For the dragons live for thousands of years, and their own rate of reproduction would be most certainly much lower than our very own, especially in medieval times. And if dragons can already be slain by adventurer parties, a dragon in human form could perhaps be slain even easier, since among other things, it can't fly. Now, if the offspring of the normal human population and that of the humanoid dragons are fertile, that is, if there is offspring at all in the first place, humanity would over the course of generations become just much more powerful and longer lived and more magical and basically superior in every single way, shape and form because of so much dragon blood entering humankind. And perhaps this is also the reason why humans can use magic or can become stronger than an orc or ogre, simply because they have dragon blood in them, because their bones, their muscle tissue are in actuality part dragon and therefore much stronger and tougher than anything the human body without it, without the dragon blood and dragon heritage, can actually produce. But if not, if no cross-species, interspecies reviewing is possible, then these humanoid dragons would likely be the Targaryens from Game of Thrones. They would come to rule their respective nations and empires, except that they can't lose or misplace their dragons, since they are their own dragons. Now, as for what they would do with their power, it would depend of course on how the fantasy world would work, the personality of the dragons, and whether or not they are good or evil aligned. But in a more realistic sense, when the dragons have full agency over themselves, they would likely become as drunk with power, as evil or as good as we humans can do, with the added distinction that they are truly something better than us, poor, short-lived, magically disadvantaged humans. So this alone will have an impact on even the best of dragons, because they would not see us as their own equals. But they could nonetheless become a great boon to humanity. Benevolent overlords essentially, that prevent wars, thanks to their experience, solve famines that would occur many decades in the future, simply because they recognize the signs. They could solve the housing crisis, simply because they can build probably houses in a single day. And yes, houses. They can basically burn bricks with their own fire. And if they can fly, albeit with the aid of a fly spell, then construction work would just be that much more easy. And we could therefore enter a peaceful age, which, given the fact that humans still outnumber these dragons thanks to their shorter life cycles, let's say 10 or even 100,000 to 1, this would also mean that the dragons still would have a very distinct interest in at least making parts of humanity loyal to their cause, no matter what the cause might be. And finally, we also have to think about how these human dragons would feel about the actual dragons, how their relationship would work. Are they belittled by the true dragons with a true physical dragon form? Are they pitied? Do these human dragons resent their scaly brethren and therefore perhaps mobilize the humans, orcs, or elvish population to slay the dragons, the true proper dragons that is, so that they can ascend to the top of the world, now being the strongest and most magical creatures that exist, and then rule the world with an iron fist instead of an iron claw? Or are they now that they have gained a human form, now that their kids and offspring have made human connections and have human friends, childhood friends, companions, perhaps a human wife or at least concubine, become humanity's salvation against the tyrannical and cruel true dragons that see humans as frauds at the best and prey animals at the worst of times? You see, there are many great ways to portray human dragons and the impact they have. But depending on the setting, it should have a really big one. Especially if the setting has no other overpowered bloodlines like angel blood or devil blood or demon blood or giant's blood or god's blood. Then dragon blood should, in my opinion, define the fantasy world to a very great degree. And with that said, now it's your turn. Do you agree with what I have said? Do you have other ideas for how humanoid dragons could impact the human population and interact with it? And there's still winged brethren for that matter. Then please let me know down in the comment section. And while you type, I say thank you very much for watching and have a nice day.